Hey everybody, movie reviewer next story here, and I'm back with another review. And this is another duology. I'm again trying to look through a lot of the smaller series I have, maybe do some longer series. And well, I just saw Ninja. This is a 2009 action martial arts film, directed by Isaac Florentine, and it stars Scott Adkins, Mika Hiji, Tsuyoshi Ihara, and Miles Anderson and Igawa. In this film, a Westerner named Casey studying ninjutsu in Japan is asked by the sensei to return to New York to protect the legendary Yoroi Bitsu, an armored chest that contains the weapons of the last Koga ninja. So, what did I think of Ninja? Well, when I first saw this, I saw it knowing that that year there were two semi-well-known ninja films, the other being Ninja Assassin. And the last time I watched that, I legitimately fell asleep, but that's probably because that was when I was staying up all night watching movies. So I'll have to give it another chance. But this one I do think is a fun ninja action film, but there are some things filmmaking wise that do annoy me that have nothing to do with the budget, really, for the most part, but just kind of seem a bit lazy. But let me get to the cast. Scott Adkins plays Casey. He's an orphan brought up by this uh, dojo, and I think Scott Adkins is one of the most snubbed action stars of all time. Because with people like, Dolph Lundgren and Jean Claude Van Damme, they had like very big high periods, and then a lot of people lost interest in their films, so they kept getting less and less money for the budgets, and they had to take whatever jobs they could. And I'm not going to shit on them for that, because that happens to every actor, and acting like it doesn't happen to every actor is a stupid thing to say. Unless you're like super high up on the Hollywood totem pole, you do not stay relevant for more than at the most 2 decades. But with Scott Adkins, it's that he's always been in indie films, which I'm fine with. He's always been in low budget indie films, and the only times he's been in big budget action films is when he's a side character, like in Criminal with Kevin Costner, in American Assassin, which I actually really liked that movie, but they did misuse Scott Adkins. Um, the newest John Wick, from what I hear, he's a small villain character that is in a fat suit, and it kind of makes me not want to see the movie because it's yet another big budget film that wastes an actor who's both a really good actor in his own right and amazing at the martial arts. Just watch a film called Legacy of Lies to see him stretching his acting muscles and his uh, martial arts stuff. And Avengement is actually a really damn good crime thriller drama where he gives a pretty knockout performance. But him here, I think he does a good job. His character isn't super deep. None of them really are. But he does a good job. Tsuyoshi Hara plays Masazuka. He's basically an enemy of the dojo because he left because he tried to kill Casey. He's kind of a paint by numbers villain, but he's at least a lot better than Carl Ang was in the last movie I saw, Man with the Iron Fist 2. He is actually threatening. He is also really good in his martial arts. Um, Mika Hiji plays Namiko, who's kind of a love interest to Casey. It's not really super established. There's like one scene of them in the shower, but it's more so him trying to warm her up. But I don't think I think she's decent, and I like that in her fight scenes they didn't try to make her like a girl boss. They tried to make her a bit more realistic because while she is experienced in martial arts, she is still kind of thin and not. There's multiple scenes where there's multiple guys coming at her at once, and when she's one on one with a guy, she can do kind of all right. But then when there's multiple people, they actually make it realistic and don't have her just like killing everybody. She gets a weapon to fight multiple ones. They make it well. They do it well, and Miles Anderson as Temple. He's not in the film that much, but he's kind of a secondary villain. He has a cult. He's fine. And Tokugawa plays Sensei. Not in the film much either, but it's meant to be kind of a smaller role. Um, he, I do recognize him from other films. He's been in quite a lot. Um, I think he does a good job. But this film, uh, from what I've heard from many people, the sequel is better. And I will be watching the sequel for the first time. Um, while I did say that this film is fun, it does have its issues. One, I do think this film is one of those where the story is not strong enough for the runtime. Now, this film is only 83 minutes without credits, which is really short. Now, you're probably saying, oh, it's a straightforward action film, so it's short and gets to the point. Well, this film actually takes quite a bit to get the whole plot moving. It does have some action in those moments, but it does take a bit. And with a movie like this, my expectation is like just get into the action if you're not going to have an insane like super complicated plot. And the plot here is mainly just, oh, there's an artifact that Casey and Namiko have to hide, and there's a guy who used to be in the clan that wants to get the artifact. That's about it. It's not super complicated. It's very straightforward. And yes, while I don't think the film is poorly paced, it does suffer from something a few Millennium films do suffer from, which is that the plots seem to think they're more complicated than they actually are. And it's not that I want a complicated plot. I just rather, if you're not going to have a complicated plot, at least go all out with the action. And this film does have some really good action. A big highlight would be the showdown at the end and the fight between Casey and a bunch of the cult members. I really liked that scene. There's a couple things that they do in these fight scenes that does annoy me though. They use this stinger sound effect. Now, I know this might be seen as a nitpick, but it really shows kind of some laziness in the sound design for me, where they keep using the da 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 da, which is used in SpongeBob all the time. And I'm not saying it's bad because it's used in SpongeBob. If you're going to use that, at least use it sparingly. Lara Croft Tomb Raider, a movie that I absolutely love, uses the sound effect as well. But they have it mixed into the soundtrack. Whenever it's used in this movie, it's used about 4 times. It really comes off as cheap and like they didn't have enough of a score, which this film for the most part sounds like it's done, like the score is done by a actual orchestra, maybe not 100-piece but maybe 50-piece, something like that. But I don't know, just something seemed a bit off about it. uh there's a thing that they do in the fight scenes camera wise where they do a bunch of in camera zooms, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think 300 came out a couple years before this. Make sure. Yeah, 300 came out in 2006. It feels like they're trying to replicate that, but it doesn't exactly work here. It just kind of feels like they wanted to get through the shots as quick as possible. There's a bit where Casey like attacks a guy um outside of the cult's building, and it zooms in like that multiple times. I'm not a big fan of that. I find it kind of distracting. Um, there's some really weird CGI blood bits at times. Now, the times where I think it works and where I think they successfully hide the budget with that are when uh Mazazuka is attacking the dojo members in the rain, because you actually see like the blood hit the ground, and for the most part it hides it with because the rain. And then they do it in broad daylight, and then you notice that there's no like blood on the ground, and it kind of sticks out to me. It reminds me of a bit in Resident Evil Retribution, where they do that as well. Um, But I don't know, just it seemed a bit off, and I would hope that a movie like this would at least use practical blood effects. But here's the thing, half the time the blood effects don't look bad. And there's some really cool effects that they use on the swords at times, where they have him like swinging it around and there's like a trail behind the sword. I actually like that effect. They use that effect in V for Vendetta when he's fighting with the Sai against the police officers, and I found that interesting. Um, and here I like it. And again, for the most part, the action scenes are very, very, very well done. No real complaints there. But there are times where it's not that the choreography misses, it's that I don't know, just something about how it's shot kind of felt off. Because Isaac Florentine is a director well known in the action sphere. He directed Undisputed 2, 3, 4, Acts of Vengeance, which I really liked, Close Range, which I thought was decent, um, High Voltage, underrated action film. Uh, and he's working on other films like Hellfire, uh, and yeah, like I do think he is a legitimately great director when it comes to action. Special Forces as well was pretty fun. Scott Adkins actually kicks insane ass in that movie. But I don't know, something about this film seems off. It doesn't seem as exciting as it could be or something. Even though a lot of the action is very well done, something about it just seems off. I don't know why. Maybe it's the way some of it's filmed. Maybe it's the characters aren't as interesting as I think they could be. Maybe the sequel fixes that. It's still Isaac Florentine directing, which I have hopes for, but I don't know. Something about this just seems off. Um, but I can give some legitimate pros because I do ultimately like the film. I do just have my issues with it. Again, Scott Adkins. Somebody made a review on Letterboxd in 2012 that said if Scott Adkins isn't the biggest action star in the world in 5 years, then we as a society have failed. I understand completely what they're saying, and the fact that he hasn't. It's now, oh, I don't know, 11 years later after that review, and he still has not reached that. And there's some people that'll be like, well, nobody wants these types of movies anymore, and there are some people that are like that, and I'm like, that's a really stupid opinion. I'm sorry. I know there's no objective thing on opinions, but that opinion sounds really like someone who just doesn't like action movies. Because if you do like action movies, you'd understand how much in the shit we are right now. But I I can understand where this person's coming from with the he's not famous, we have failed, because we kind of have. Hollywood has really taken a downfall, and yeah, seeing older Scott Adkins movies like this, or seeing his other movies, really does hammer at home that he should have been a bigger star. Um, the film, again, it's 83 minutes without the credits. It goes by pretty well. It's not boring. That's the ultimate sin an action movie can commit, is that it's boring. Um, I will say they at least change up the action. It's not all martial arts. There's some gun action, which is pretty well done. Shit being destroyed, windows being broken, people getting caught in the crossfire. They change it up quite often, which is nice. Um, it's not just like swords. Sometimes it's just hand to hand. Sometimes it's shuriken. Sometimes it's sai. I like when a movie doesn't just do the same thing over and over. Um, and when they change up the environments as well. Um, the film is decently violent. Could have been a bit more violent, but hope that the sequel uses a bit more, um, you know, practical effects, because this film, apparently the budget was like 10 million. It looks all right. Um, and I'm hoping with the lower budget they choose to not use as much CGI and more practical, which will be awesome. Um, but overall, I do recommend it. I will, especially if the sequel is better, I would recommend seeing it. Um, but I do think it is overall a good martial arts action film. It works. It breezes by. It doesn't take a lot of your time, and Scott Adkins is worth it. Worth watching the movie just for him. So, that was my review of Ninja from 2009. If you've seen the film, comment down below what you thought. Excuse me. If you have any recommendations, put those in the comments as well. And Movie Reviewer Next Door, out.